All right, let's dive into some nutrition basics today. Seems like you're off to a good start with this Fit Together episode, Nutrition Basics for Beginners, huh? Let's break it down together, see what we find.
Yeah, sounds good. It never ceases to amaze me just how foundational good nutrition is. It really does touch every single aspect of our well-being.
I think the Fit Together hosts made that really clear. They had this analogy comparing nutrition to fuel for a car. Like if you're putting the wrong kind of fuel in, your car's not going to run right. Same goes for our bodies,
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is that it goes way beyond just weight. We're talking immunity, mood, even how sharp your thinking is. Good nutrition really is the key.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty. The Fit Together episode broke things down into the three big players: carbs, proteins, and fats. And they were very clear that we need all of them, not just one or the other.
Right, it's like a well-balanced basketball team. You need all the positions: your point guard, your power forward, your center. Carbs, proteins, fats, they're the all-stars working together to keep us going.
I love a good sports analogy. So carbs, they get a bad rap sometimes, but Fit Together explained that they're our body's main source of energy. They're what power us through workouts and help our muscles recover.
Yeah, think of them like that high-octane fuel, And what's great is that you've got so many options. Grains, fruits, veggies, legumes. It doesn't have to be boring at all.
And speaking of getting going, did you know you can actually maximize your workouts by timing when you eat your carbs? Fit Together mentioned that eating them before exercise helps fuel your muscles, and then eating them after helps with recovery. I'm definitely going to try that.
Smart move. Okay, now on to the next MVP. Proteins. These guys are the muscle builders, essential for repair and growth. And they're made up of these things called amino acids.
Amino acids always sound so complicated. I remember the episode mentioned them but didn't go into much detail. What are they exactly?
Well, basically, they're the building blocks of proteins. It can get pretty technical, but what's important is that they're crucial for so many bodily functions. Fit Together didn't really touch on this, but there are actually different types: essential and non-essential. Understanding the difference can help you make better decisions about your protein sources.
Huh, that's interesting. The episode did mention some good sources though, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. They talked about meat, fish, eggs, and dairy being great sources,
Yeah.
but they also mentioned plant-based options like beans and lentils, for folks who prefer those.
And now for the MVP that I think gets way too much hate, fats. I used to think all fats were bad, but Fit Together really opened my eyes to how important they are.
I feel you, for sure. It turns out they're crucial for hormone production, helping our bodies absorb certain nutrients. And yeah, they provide energy too.
I never realized how important they were for hormone production. Fit Together gave some yummy examples of healthy fats like avocados, nuts, seeds, and olive oil, all things I happen to love. What about you? Do you have a favorite healthy fat?
It's hard to pick just one, but I gotta say, avocados are pretty amazing. They're so versatile and packed with good stuff. The key is choosing the right types of fats, and those are all great examples.
Okay, so we've got the big guys covered: carbs, proteins, and fats. But what about those micronutrients? Fit Together touched on those too, right? They mentioned vitamins and minerals and how we need them.
Absolutely. While we need those macronutrients in larger amounts, we still need micronutrients, just in smaller amounts. But don't let that fool you. They're still super important for a ton of functions.
They mentioned that these little guys, or maybe tiny but mighty nutrients is a better way to put it, they play key roles in immunity, bone health, and even carrying oxygen throughout the body. And they gave this great visual tip: eat a rainbow of fruits and veggies to get a good range of micronutrients.
Oh, I love that visual. The more colorful your plate, the wider variety of those vitamins and minerals you're likely getting. And, each color group actually represents a different phytonutrients, each with their own benefits.
That's really cool. So we got to talk about hydration, right? It seems like every health podcast out there stresses the importance of drinking enough water. What did Fit Together have to say about it?
They definitely didn't forget about H2O. They recommended aiming for 8 cups a day, but stressed that you might need to adjust that based on how active you are, which makes sense. If you're sweating more, you got to replenish those fluids.
Right, makes total sense. Hydration is so important, impacting everything from energy levels and digestion to how well we can regulate our body temperature. Even our cognitive function is affected.
Exactly. It really does affect pretty much every system. Fit Together didn't talk about electrolytes specifically, but they're also a key part of hydration. They help maintain fluid balance and support muscle function, especially important when we're being active.
That's good to know. So we've got the basics down: macronutrients, micronutrients, and hydration. But Fit Together didn't stop there. They also give some really practical tips on how to put all this knowledge into action.
That's what I appreciate about that episode. It's not just theory, it's about how to use it in your everyday life. Because, after all, knowledge is only powerful if you can actually use it.
So true. What were some of those tips that stood out to you?
Well, they really stressed planning meals ahead of time. It's such a simple thing, but people often overlook it. When you plan what you're going to eat, you're way less likely to make unhealthy choices when you're hungry and rushed.
Oh, I am so guilty of that. When I'm hungry, I just grab whatever's quickest and easiest, which usually isn't the healthiest. Planning ahead seems like it would make a huge difference, like you're setting yourself up for success, right?
Exactly. You're taking charge of your food choices and making sure you've got healthy options ready to go. That can really change your eating habits overall.
Another tip they gave was learning to decode those food labels. I gotta admit, those things can be confusing.
I hear you. Sometimes it feels like they're in a different language. But here's the thing. They're packed with the info that can actually help you make good choices. It's about figuring out what all those numbers and percentages mean and learning about serving sizes, calories, and how much of each macronutrient is there.
They did mention those serving sizes can be tricky. What you think is one serving might actually be two or even more. Always good to double check.
Oh yeah, for sure. Easy to underestimate how much you're actually eating. Food labels can really help you stay aware of your portions. Speaking of being aware, Fit Together also had some great stuff to say about mindful eating.
Oh yeah, mindful eating. They talked about tuning into your body's signals, really paying attention to what you're eating. I'm usually rushing through my meals, but I'm really intrigued by this idea of slowing down and savoring each bite. What are your thoughts on mindful eating?
You know, it's such a powerful practice. It can really change your relationship with food. Instead of just mindlessly eating, you're present during meals, tasting the flavors, the textures.
It almost sounds meditative. They talked about putting your fork down between bites, really paying attention to your body's signals of hunger and fullness. I have to admit, I rarely stop to think about whether I'm actually full.
It's so easy to get distracted and lose touch with those internal cues. Mindful eating helps you slow down, reconnect with your body, and enjoy the experience of eating.
They also gave some tips on smart snacking, encouraging people to choose nutritious snacks over the usual sugary or processed options. Things like fruits, nuts, or yogurt.
Yeah, snacking doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's all about making choices that give you sustained energy and nutrients, not just a quick sugar rush that leaves you feeling worse later.
And they reassured everyone that it's totally okay to indulge every once in a while. It's all about balance, not deprivation.
Absolutely. A healthy lifestyle is about making choices you can stick with, long term. Restricting yourself too much can backfire and actually make it harder to reach your goals.
This Fit Together episode really is packed with good stuff. It's amazing how much they covered in such a short amount of time.
They did a great job breaking down the basics in a way that's easy to understand and use. You can tell they're passionate about helping people develop healthy habits.
I totally agree. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive even deeper into some of these concepts and see what other insights we can gather from this Fit Together episode.
It's interesting how the Fit Together hosts emphasized that everyone's journey is different. Like, there's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to nutrition.
Oh, for sure. They were really big on finding what works for you, not just following some crazy restrictive diet.
Totally. The key is to listen to your body, try different things, and figure out what makes you feel good, both physically and mentally.
I love that they focus on individuality. It makes perfect sense, right? We're all different with different lifestyles and preferences. Even our gut microbiomes are different. What works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. And speaking of individuality, they touched on how genetics can play a role in how our bodies react to different foods. They didn't go into too much detail, but it's a fascinating thought, how our genes can actually influence things like how we absorb nutrients and our metabolism.
Wow, I never thought about that before. So it's not just what we eat, but also how our bodies are wired to process it, like a personalized instruction manual for nutrition.
That's a great way to put it. And that's where this whole concept of personalized nutrition comes in. It's about moving beyond those general recommendations and tailoring your diet to your own genes, lifestyle, and goals. It's still a pretty new field, but there's more and more evidence showing that it really works.
That's like the future of nutrition. I definitely want to learn more about that as I go on my own nutrition journey. But for now, let's stick with some of those practical tips that Fit Together gave. One that really stood out to me was their emphasis on meal planning. Sounds simple, but I can see how it could make a huge difference.
It really is one of those foundational habits. When you plan your meals, you're taking charge of what you eat. And that often leads to healthier choices overall.
It's like you're setting yourself up for success, right?
Exactly. You're way less likely to make those impulsive, unhealthy choices when you already have a plan in place.
That's so true. I know if I don't have a plan, I just grab whatever's easiest, which usually isn't the best option.
We've all been there. But with a little planning, you can avoid those pitfalls. Fit together even gave some suggestions for how to do it. Like, set aside some time each week to plan and then make a detailed grocery list based on your plan.
Those are really helpful steps. I also remember them talking about how important it is to read food labels. I gotta say, sometimes those labels feel like a foreign language.
I know, right? But we should learn how to break them down. They can actually be super helpful. They've got so much information that can empower you to make better decisions about what you're eating.
They really are a secret weapon for healthy eating. What kind of things should we be looking for on those labels?
Well, first off, serving sizes. It's crucial to know how much you're actually eating. Fit Together pointed out that what we think is one serving is often two or even more. So always double check that label.
Good reminder. I'm definitely guilty of thinking the whole package is one serving, especially with things like chips or crackers.
It's easy to do, but when you're mindful of serving sizes, you can make better choices about how much to eat. Another important thing is the macronutrient breakdown. Knowing how many carbs, protein, and fat are in each serving helps you make sure you're getting a balanced mix.
That makes sense, especially when we're trying to prioritize certain macros based on our goals. Like if you're trying to build muscle, you'll want to choose foods higher in protein.
Exactly. Food labels give you the power to make those choices. And while Fit Together didn't mention this specifically, I think it's good to look at the types of fat listed too.
Oh, good point. They talked about healthy fats like avocados and olive oil. Are there unhealthy fats that we should be avoiding?
Well, some types, like trans fats, have been linked to some not-so-great health outcomes. It's always a good idea to check and limit those as much as possible. But remember, fat is still an important part of a balanced diet. It's all about choosing the right kinds.
So much to learn. It's like becoming a nutrition detective. Now, let's talk about how we actually eat. Fit Together talked about this concept of mindful eating, which I found really interesting.
Mindful eating is a game changer. It's about being present while you eat, savoring each bite, and really paying attention to your body's cues.
I love how they described it. Slowing down, paying attention to the taste and texture, really being in the moment. It's so different from what most of us do, which is just mindlessly eating.
It's easy to eat on autopilot when you're busy, but mindful eating helps you break free from that and actually enjoy your food.
They even suggested putting your fork down between bites, which I thought was a great tip.
It is. It forces you to slow down and think about each bite, which can help prevent overeating. Plus, it makes the meal more enjoyable.
I'm definitely going to try that. I'm also curious about what they said about snacking. I'm a bit of a snacker, so I'm always looking for health options.
Well, they made it clear that snacking isn't inherently bad. It's about making smart choices. Choosing snacks that give you lasting energy and nutrients, not just a sugar rush followed by a crash.
That's good to hear. What are some examples of healthy snacks we can reach for?
They mentioned things like fruits, nuts, or yogurt. Good alternatives to those processed snacks. They've got a good balance of protein, fiber, and healthy fats, which will keep you feeling full longer.
Those all sound great and easy enough to incorporate. But what about when you're really craving something a little more indulgent? Did they talk about treating yourself at all?
They did. And I'm happy to say they weren't all about restriction. They said it's totally fine to indulge every once in a while. It's all about finding a balance that works for you.
That's a relief. I thought they were going to say we had to give up all the good stuff.
Not at all. Having a healthy relationship with food means allowing yourself to enjoy the things you love. In moderation, of course.
They even use that great analogy, thinking of your diet like a bank account. You can make a few withdrawals as long as you're making regular deposits of nutritious foods.
I love that analogy. It's a perfect way to think about a balanced approach to nutrition.
It's not about being perfect. It's about making choices that support your overall well-being. So we've covered a lot. It seems like the Fit Together hosts did a great job of giving a comprehensive overview of nutrition basics, and they provided some really useful tips.
Absolutely. And what's impressive is that they did it in a way that was engaging and interesting. You can tell they really want to help people understand the importance of nutrition.
Couldn't agree more. Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to touch on something they said at the beginning. The idea that everyone's journey is different.
That's so important to remember. There's no one right way to approach nutrition. What works for one person might not work for another, and that's okay.
They really emphasized finding what works for you, trying different things, listening to your body.
It's about advocating for yourself and figuring out what your body needs to thrive. Sometimes that might mean getting guidance from a professional, like a registered dietitian. They can help you personalize your nutrition plan.
That's a great suggestion, especially if you have any specific health concerns or dietary restrictions. As we head into the last part of our deep dive, I think it's worth asking ourselves this question. What does a healthy and sustainable approach to nutrition look like for you?
That's a great question to consider. It's a personal journey, and it starts with being aware of yourself and being willing to try new things. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making small changes that you can stick with over time.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore some more insights from the Fit Together episode. And we'll delve deeper into that concept of personalized nutrition and how you can make it work for you. We've talked about how important it is to, personalize your approach to nutrition, but it can be pretty overwhelming trying to figure out what works best for you,
Yeah.
Especially with all the conflicting information out there.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like one day a certain food is a superfood. The next day it's the worst thing you could possibly eat. It's enough to make anyone just give up.
Right. So how do we sort through all that? The Fit Together episode touched on this, saying that above all, you gotta listen to your body.
It sounds so simple, but it's really important. Pay attention to how different foods make you feel, both physically and mentally. Like, do you feel energized after a certain meal? Or do you feel sluggish and foggy?
They were really encouraging listeners to experiment, to not be afraid to challenge those common nutrition myths.
Oh, I love that. They even gave the example of, like, maybe you've always heard carbs are bad, but then you try adding more whole grains to your diet, and you find that you actually have more energy and feel better overall. It's about finding what works for you, not just blindly following what everyone else is doing.
That's so true. I used to be terrified of carbs, but then I started experimenting with different types and realized that some, like sweet potatoes and brown rice, actually make me feel great. It was a total game changer.
It's empowering, isn't it? When you discover what works for you, it turns personalized nutrition into this exciting journey.
Absolutely. They also talked about how important it is to not be too restrictive.
I think that's such a crucial message, especially with all the pressure to try these extreme diets and quick fixes. Fit Together reminded us that it's okay to enjoy those foods you love every now and then. It's about finding a balance that works for you mentally and physically.
I love that bank account analogy they used. You can have a few splurges here and there as long as you're making those regular deposits of healthy foods.
Such a great way to think about it. It's not about deprivation. It's about making choices that support your overall well-being.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into nutrition basics, it's important to remember that this is just the beginning.
Yeah, it's a lifelong journey, right? You're always learning, experimenting, adapting. The more you learn about nutrition, the better equipped you are to make choices that nourish you.
This deep dive, along with the Fit Together episode, has given us a solid foundation. But ultimately, it's up to you to take what you've learned and apply it to your own life.
Exactly. And as you continue exploring, remember to be curious, open-minded, and kind to yourself. There's no one right way to eat. It's all about finding what makes you feel your best.
So what's one small step you can take today to nourish your body and move closer to your health goals? Maybe it's adding more veggies to your dinner, or swapping out that sugary drink for water, or even just taking a moment to really savor your next meal. Every little bit counts.
That's right. And remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Be patient with yourself, celebrate those wins, and enjoy the journey.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and inspiring. Until next time, happy and healthy eating.